I never meant for the alien queen to discover my secret love. On Zurith, prime secrets were supposed to die quietly in the vacuum between stars. I was only a human cultural liaison, a curiosity kept alive for diplomacy. Yet my heart betrayed me when I fell in love with Lyrene, a scholar from the Queen's inner court. Our meetings were brief and hidden among crystal libraries and bioluminescent gardens. Every stolen glance felt like rebellion. Every whispered promise felt like treason. The Queen was ancient, brilliant, and terrifyingly perceptive. When her summons came, it arrived without warning. A silver sigil burned itself into my chamber wall. The message was clear and undeniable. Come alone. The palace corridors seemed longer that night. The air itself vibrated with judgment. I wondered if Lyrene had been captured. Or worse. When the gates to the private chamber opened, silence swallowed me whole. The alien queen sat upon a living throne that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her crown shimmered with the memories of conquered civilizations. She dismissed her guards with a gesture. Fear crawled up my spine as the chamber sealed itself. You hide your emotions poorly, human, she said. Her voice was neither cruel nor kind, merely absolute. I expected execution or exile. Instead, she studied me like a puzzle worth solving. She spoke of love as if it were a weapon sharper than any blade. She knew about Lyrene. She knew about every meeting. Yet she did not sound angry. She sounded curious. The Queen confessed she had never loved anyone in her 1,000-year reign. And that frightened her more than betrayal. The Queen descended from her throne and walked among the stars embedded in the floor. She asked me why humans loved so fiercely despite such short lives. I told her love was the only way we defeated time. She listened, truly listened. I realized then that the chamber was not a courtroom. It was a confession chamber. She revealed that Lyrene's compassion had begun to change the empire. That my love was not weakness, but contagion. She could destroy it, or she could understand it. When she placed her hand upon my chest, she felt my racing heart. Her eyes softened. For the first time in history, the Queen hesitated. The Queen gave me a choice no human had ever received. Leave the Empire forever and protect Lyrene's life. Or stay and help teach her people what love truly meant. I chose to stay. The Queen smiled faintly, a gesture rumored to cause wars. She declared love a protected force within the Empire. The court erupted in disbelief. Traditions shattered overnight. Lyrene was summoned openly at last. Our hands touched without fear. And the Queen watched not with jealousy, but with hope. Years later, historians would say the Empire changed that night. They would say a human taught an immortal queen how to feel. I remained by Lyrene's side. The Queen remained distant yet observant. Sometimes she asked questions about dreams and sacrifice. Sometimes she simply listened. Love became a language spoken across galaxies. And I learned that the most dangerous secret in the universe was never forbidden love. It was teaching the powerful how to feel. Time changed differently after that night. The Empire still expanded, fleets still burned stars into submission, yet something invisible had shifted beneath the machinery of conquest. I felt it first in the silence. The palace grew quieter, not emptier but thoughtful, as if the walls themselves were listening. The Queen no longer summoned me only for diplomacy or ritual. She summoned me to talk. At first our conversations were careful and formal. She asked about human customs, about poetry, about why humans sang when they were afraid. I answered honestly, because lying to an immortal ruler who could taste deception in the air felt pointless. I told her we sang because silence made fear louder. That answer stayed with her. Lyrene noticed the change before I did. She told me the Queen had stopped executing failed admirals immediately, that she now asked them why they failed. The court whispered nervously. Mercy was more frightening than cruelty to those raised under absolute rule. One night, the Queen summoned me again to her private chamber. This time there was no fear in my chest, only anticipation. The chamber had changed. Where once there had been stark stone and cosmic projections of conquered worlds, now there were living gardens growing along the walls. Plants from dozens of species intertwined, breathing together. The Queen stood among them without her crown. For the first time, I saw her not as a symbol, but as a being. She asked me if love could exist without possession. The question surprised me. I told her humans struggled with that every day. That love was not ownership, but choice renewed again and again. She was silent for a long time, long enough that I thought she might dismiss the idea entirely. Instead, she spoke of her past, of how she was crowned during a civil war, of how affection had been weaponized against her, how every attempt at closeness ended in betrayal or assassination. Love, to her, had always been a weakness others tried to exploit. Until now. She looked at me then, not with authority, but with vulnerability. She admitted that watching Lyrene and me had confused her, that our love had not made us reckless or disloyal. It had made us brave, brave enough to challenge her empire without raising a single weapon. That night she asked me to teach her, not to rule differently, but to feel differently. She asked what it meant to miss someone, what it meant to hope without certainty. I spoke until my voice grew hoarse. I spoke of human fragility, of knowing every goodbye might be the last, of how that knowledge sharpened love into something urgent and precious. The Queen listened, truly listened. And when I finished, she surprised me again. She said she envied humans, not for our technology or adaptability, but for our impermanence. Because eternity made hesitation eternal too. In the weeks that followed, she began to walk among her people. Not in disguise, not surrounded by guards, but openly. The empire trembled. Revolutions were expected, assassinations predicted. None came. Instead, people stared, unsure how to exist in the presence of a ruler who no longer hid behind fear. Lyrene became an ambassador of culture rather than a hidden scholar. She spoke openly of empathy, of coexistence, of how strength multiplied when shared rather than hoarded. I watched her shine in the light she had long deserved, and I loved her more fiercely for it. One evening, the Queen invited us both to the chamber. The same chamber that once felt like a tomb, now felt like a sanctuary. She told us she had made a decision that would echo across millennia. She would no longer rule alone. Councils would be formed. Voices once silenced would now advise. Not because she was weak, but because she had learned that listening was the greatest form of power. The Empire reacted violently at first, not with weapons, but with fear. Systems built on terror resisted change. Yet the Queen stood firm, and when challenged, she did not punish. She explained. That alone altered history. There came a night when the Queen asked me a question I never expected. She asked if I believed she could love. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a being. I told her love was not a trait. It was a risk, and she had already taken the first step by asking. She closed her eyes then, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to grieve. For centuries spent alone. For connections she never dared to want. for the person she might have been. I did not interrupt. Some moments are sacred because they are shared silently. When she opened her eyes again, something in them had changed forever. Not softened, but deepened. She thanked me, not as a subject thanks a ruler, but as one soul thanks another. Years later, historians would argue about what truly changed the empire. Some would credit reforms, others diplomacy, others military restraint. Few would admit the truth, that it all began because an immortal queen discovered love was not a weakness, and a human taught her that the greatest power in the universe was the courage to feel. Peace is louder than war when an empire is built on conquest. I learned that truth when the outer systems began to resist not with weapons, but with questions. Worlds long subjugated demanded representation. Species once erased from history requested restoration. The Queen listened. That alone shook the galaxy. Not everyone welcomed the change. Power never surrenders quietly. Within the highest ranks of the fleet, there were admirals who believed fear was the only language that kept order. They whispered that the Queen had been corrupted, that human sentiment had weakened her will, that love was a contagion, and contagions must be purged. Lyrene sensed it before intelligence confirmed it. She said the air felt sharp again, like the moments before a storm tears the sky open. She was right. The uprising did not begin at the edges of the empire. It began at the core. A faction within the Imperial Command seized 3 battle armadas and declared the Queen unfit to rule. They broadcast their manifesto across the stars. They named me. They named Lyrene. They called us the architects of decay. The Queen summoned me privately once more. Not to confess, not to learn, but to prepare. She stood before the stellar map as red lights bloomed across it like spreading wounds. For the first time since I had known her, she looked tired. Not afraid, not uncertain, but burdened. She asked me a question no ruler had ever asked a human. She asked what I would do if I were her. I told her the truth, that humans had torn themselves apart countless times over the same choice. Rule through fear and survive briefly, or rule through trust and risk everything. I told her that love never promised victory, only meaning. She nodded. Then she did something that stunned me. She handed me authority codes that could override entire fleets. She trusted me with the power to burn systems, or to save them. That was the moment I understood the true weight of what she had learned. The rebels struck first, a coordinated assault on communication hubs designed to isolate the Queen from her people. They expected confusion. They expected panic. Instead, they found unity. Lyrene addressed the Empire live, not as a subject, not as a symbol, but as a voice. She spoke of shared futures, of how empires rot when they forget the lives that sustain them, of how strength measured only in fear collapses under its own weight. She did not plead. She invited. Millions listened. Some rejected her words. Many did not. Battles erupted across space, not the kind sung about in war epics, but surgical, restrained. The Queen ordered minimal force. Every command carried the same directive: protect lives. Admirals defected mid-conflict. Crews refused orders that demanded annihilation. The empire fractured, but it did not fall. In the midst of it all, the rebels attempted their final gambit, an assassination strike aimed directly at the Queen's chamber. I was there when the alarms screamed. When the walls sealed, when the stars outside flickered under weapons fire, the Queen stood calm as chaos tried to claw its way in. She told me something I will never forget. She said that whatever happened next, she did not regret learning how to feel. The chamber shook as the attackers breached the outer defenses. Elite warriors who had once sworn loyalty now advanced with cold purpose. They demanded her abdication. They offered survival in exchange for surrender. She refused, not with arrogance, but with clarity. She spoke to them not as enemies, but as lost children of an empire that had taught them fear was safety. She told them she would not rule a future built on silence and grave. They attacked. I do not remember drawing the weapon, only the instinct to stand between her and death. Humans are fragile, but fragility sharpens resolve. The battle was brief and brutal. Imperial guards loyal to the Queen arrived within moments. The rebels fell, not all dead, many alive and disarmed. The Queen ordered their capture, not their execution. That decision echoed louder than any explosion. When the war ended weeks later, the Empire was forever changed. Not unified, but aligned. Systems were granted autonomy. Former enemies became partners. The Queen remained on the throne, but she was no longer alone upon it. There was a ceremony marking the end of the conflict. Not a victory parade, but a remembrance. For lives lost, for futures nearly destroyed. The Queen invited me to stand beside her. Before the entire empire, she declared that love had not weakened her reign. It had saved it. I felt Lyrene's hand in mine. Steady, warm, real. That night, alone beneath artificial stars, the Queen spoke one final truth. She said empires rise and fall. But what endured was what they dared to protect when destruction was easier. She looked at me and smiled. Not the smile of a conqueror, but the smile of someone who had chosen meaning over eternity. And in that moment, I knew the galaxy would never be the same. Not because of power, but because an immortal ruler had learned what it meant to love.